Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to border management, as the Ministry of Home Affairs will introduce a smart border project with drones, radars, modern cameras and other technologies to make the frontiers with Pakistan and Bangladesh impenetrable and to eliminate illegal infiltration. The second article is related to Quad, as India is set to host a foreign ministers meeting of the Quad. Additionally, in the prelims pointer section, we'll take up 5 articles which will be helpful for your prelims preparation. The first article is related to border management, as the Ministry of Home Affairs will introduce a smart border project with drones, modern cameras, radars and other advanced technology to make the frontiers with Bangladesh and Pakistan impenetrable and to eliminate illegal infiltration into India. Therefore, we'll discuss the need for border management for India, the challenges that India faces with respect to border management with its neighboring countries. We'll emphasize upon the land border management for India. We'll also look at the steps taken by the government in this regard and a few suggestions as well. This is important in GS3 under the topic security challenges and their management in the border areas. First, let us start with the need for border management. India shares long land boundaries with several countries. For example, with Pakistan, we have more than 3,300 km long border. We have a more than 3,400 km border with China, 1,751 km border with Nepal, 1,643 km border with Myanmar, and also the longest boundary with Bangladesh, which is more than 4,096 kilometers. Now, we need to effectively manage our borders, safeguard our borders to ensure that national security is not compromised. Because the effective border management will ensure that infiltration does not happen and to ensure that the cross-border terrorism does not come into India. Similarly, the trafficking does not happen cross borders, arms smuggling, drug trafficking as well as human trafficking. Also, border management is required to ensure the sovereignty and territorial integrity. We need to protect our territory. For example, for the protection of the territory only various standoffs happen, like the Galwan Valley clash in 2020. Similarly, to ensure demographic stability, borders need to be protected because otherwise there will illegal infiltration which will happen, which will affect the demography in the Indian states. For example, the illegal infiltration from Bangladesh into various Indian states including West Bengal and Assam. Therefore, we conducted the NRC in Assam, the National Register of Citizens, to identify the illegal immigrants. Similarly, to protect the social harmony, because the border communities, if they are peaceful, they will also aid in the protection of the borders and for effective border management. And it is also essential to ensure development in the border areas, to ensure connectivity as well. Therefore, India has taken up various projects to ensure the development in border areas and development of infrastructure like the border roads. Similarly, the programs like Vibrant Villages program to ensure that the people in the border villages, they do not migrate from there, rather they are settling there. Therefore, the infrastructure is improved in the border areas, and also to ensure maritime security and therefore the protection of the maritime borders as well. Now we'll discuss the border management challenges with the neighboring countries, focusing upon the land borders one by one. Let us start with India-China borders. What are the challenges in the management of the India-China border? India and China, we share a long border and we have unresolved boundary disputes, both in the eastern sector and also in the western sector. For example, in the eastern sector, the India-China border is defined by the McMahon line. Now, this was agreed upon by Sir Henry McMahon with the Tibetan government, but the China never recognized the McMahon line, claiming that Tibet did not have the authority to enter into bilateral agreements, although the McMahon line was agreed upon between Tibet and India. Therefore, they have been claiming the territory south of the McMahon line, also claiming that this is also Chinese territory. Although the McMahon line separates Arunachal Pradesh, which is an integral part of India, from Tibet. Similarly, in the western sector also the boundary is disputed. In the western sector, the boundary is defined by the Johnson line. but China does not accept that as well, because it claims the Aksai Chin region also as Chinese territory. It is illegally occupied by China, whereas it is Indian territory, and the Johnson line defines the border between China and India in the western borders. Similarly, there are territorial integrity related concerns because of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, because the China-Pakistan economic corridor passes through the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is again an integral part of India. Therefore, the boundary is disputed here as well. Plus, there is infrastructure building by China, especially in the western region. Asymmetrical infrastructure is being built by China, as China is setting up border villages across the India-China border, developing the infrastructure at a high speed. They are developing roads, railway lines, even airstrips, etc. And therefore, it has a better logistical support for its armed forces in the India-China border region. Plus, on the Indian side, there is an issue of a dual command structure, because here the command is in the form of ITBP and the army managing the India-China border. ITBP comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs, whereas the army comes under the Ministry of Defense. Therefore, there are incoherencies with respect to the operational command. And there is an aggressive Chinese posture also along the India-China border, as well as the Chinese mindset in general. The Chinese have the expansionist mindset, therefore employing the tactics like the salami slicing, etc. Plus, there are water security related concerns also, because China has been building dams upon Brahmaputra. Therefore, it will cause the manipulation of the water flows and also the concerns related to ecological degradation, causing floods and droughts in the Indian side. Plus, there are deficiencies with respect to surveillance also. This deficiency in the Indian surveillance along the India-China border is because of the terrain. The terrain is difficult, plus the weather conditions. The weather conditions are also hostile. Also, China resorts to various other forms of warfare, including the cyber warfare and information-related warfare. Now, what are the steps that India has taken already with respect to the border management with China? You need to quote some facts when you are writing this in the answer. First, with respect to the development of infrastructure, India has taken giant strides. For example, the opening of the Sela Tunnel, the development of the frontier highway in Arunachal Pradesh, and also setting up of the logistics hubs. We have opened the logistics hubs in Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh. Similarly, going for the development related projects in the border areas, like the programs including the Vibrant Villages program, that is to ensure that the connectivity is there in all weathers and to prevent the migration of the people from the border areas, and to ensure there are enhanced livelihood opportunities in the border areas itself. Plus, we have been going for military modernization to ensure that we are able to go for forward deployment of the troops and development of a new mountain strike corps as well. Plus, we have gone for smart fencing along the borders, for example, through the CBUMS border management system, like the deployment of the unmanned aerial vehicles like Heron, the night vision devices and the satellite imagery, as well as the deployment of the motion sensors to prevent illegal infiltration also. The BRO has also implemented several projects, for example, the Char Dham Mahamarg, the development of the Darbuk Shok Daulat Beg Oldi Road, and also the airstrips at Neoma and the Daulat Beg Oldi, which are again strategic in nature, and also going for the strategic defense partnerships with the other countries also, for example, participation in Quad and the signing of the Indo-US Logistics Pacts as well. Next, let us discuss the challenges that India faces with respect to the border management with Pakistan. Again, with Pakistan, we have unresolved boundary disputes. For example, the dispute related to the Siachen Glacier. The boundary north of the point NJ9842, this was left undemarcated. Therefore, Pakistan started claiming it, claiming the Siachen Glacier also as its own territory, whereas it is actually an integral part of India. Therefore, there is a dispute regarding the Siachen Glacier. Also, there is dispute regarding the Sar Creek also, as Pakistan claims the entire Sar Creek to be its own territory, whereas India claims that the international maritime boundary should pass through the central portion of the Sar Creek. And this is in line with the Thalweg doctrine also, which should be applied regarding the Sar Creek boundary. Also, there is the illegal occupation of the entire Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is again an integral part of India. Plus there is cross-border terrorism also, which Pakistan resorts to. It resorts to the tactics against India which are asymmetric in nature. For example, going for state-sponsored terrorism, and this is evident through the terrorists, through the infiltrators apprehended by the Indian side. For example, the operatives of Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba, they have direct sponsorship from the Inter-Services Intelligence, the ISI agency of Pakistan, and therefore the attacks happened in Uri in 2016, in Pulwama in 2019. There have also been ceasefire violations as well. There is continuous shelling which happens often along the line of control between India and Pakistan, and this is used as a cover fire. The shelling along the line of control is used like a cover fire which is provided for the infiltration activities, for pushing the terrorists into the Indian side from Pakistan. And also there is the issue related to narco-terrorism and the usage of drones now for the narco-terrorism, for dropping heroin, for dropping drugs into the Indian side along the Punjab border also, not only into Jammu and Kashmir, and dropping not only drugs but also arms including AK-47, the improvised explosive devices, and even fake documents as well. Plus there is smuggling which happens along the India-Pakistan border, and the pushing of the fake Indian currency notes as well into the Indian side. Plus this terrain is porous in nature, because if you observe the terrain from Jammu and Kashmir till Gujarat, some portions there are gaps because of the riverine nature of the boundary, and sometimes there are desert dunes and marshy lands also, for example in Gujarat. Plus there is radicalization of the border youth as well, which is being done from the side of Pakistan by spreading propaganda on the social media, by pushing hate speech and going for digital radicalization as well. Now, what are the steps that India has taken with respect to border management with Pakistan? First, obviously, the border management system going for smart fencing, and also the anti-drone infrastructure also India has been installing now. For example, using drone jammers or RF signal interceptors and QRTs, etc. Plus going for the modernization of the border outposts, by ensuring that they are equipped with the night vision equipments and also the high mast surveillance towers and fortified shelters to protect them against the shelling from the cross LOC. There is the border roads development also under the Bharatmala Pre-Yojana, and the deployment of unmanned aerial vehicles, the aerial surveillance using Heron, Rustam 2 and quadcopters. Also the multi-agency coordination is ensured. For example, the coordination between the Border Security Force, the Intelligence Bureau, RAW, NIA and the State Police, and therefore the joint task forces are also established to improve the coordination. And there is the coastal and creek area security measures also put in place. For example, the water wing of the BSF guards this area by using the marine radars also, and the patrolling is done under the coastal security scheme and through the Sagar Kavach exercises as well. There are various bilateral institutional mechanisms also. For example, through the hotlines, the Director Generals also talk between the Indian and the Pakistan side. There are regular flag meetings which are conducted, and the BSF and the Pak Rangers coordination meetings also happen. Please remember these facts and try to quote these when you are writing the answer. Next, let us take up the challenges that India faces with respect to the border management with Bangladesh. Again, with Bangladesh, we have a porous border, and the terrain is complex because large parts of it are riverine borders which are used for smuggling, and India's boundary with Bangladesh is the longest one. It is more than 4096 kilometers, and some parts of it are plagued by forests, agricultural fields, densely populated villages along the border as well as the riverine boundary, and therefore illegal migration happens, and even the identity fraud also happens along the border region. This puts the demographic pressure in the Indian state of West Bengal and Assam particularly, and this is happening both because of the pressure from the Bangladesh side, because there is a population explosion and very few resources for a huge population. Therefore, for seeking the economic opportunities, infiltration happens into India. Plus there are socio-economic pull factors also because of better quality of life, better economic opportunities available on the Indian side, and this is impacting particularly the states of West Bengal, Tripura and Assam. Similarly, the cattle smuggling and narcotic smuggling happens along the Bangladesh border because of the fence gaps and the presence of the local networks. There are armed smugglers also operating in this region, and because of the terrain which is also porous. Plus, there is the breaches of the fencing along the India-Bangladesh border. About 150 kilometers is left unfenced because of the riverine nature, and also there is violence and attacks on the BSF. The BSF guards are attacked by the armed smugglers operating in the region, and the human trafficking also happens because from the Bangladesh side, there is the trafficking of women and children into India for the purpose of forced labor and also for sexual exploitation. And there is also the pushing of the fake Indian currency notes from Bangladesh into India. This is particularly concerning for us because it destabilizes our economy and it is used for the financing of terrorist related activities. Now, what are the steps that India has taken with respect to the border management with Bangladesh? First, we have gone for primarily fencing, as about 90% of the fencing related work has been completed, which was sanctioned, and the remaining is either riverine fencing, which we are protecting via the uses of sensors, and we have gone for flood lighting also to ensure that we have surveillance available for the night time as well, and there are no gaps in the surveillance. Plus, we have implemented the CBUMS also, the smart fencing along the India-Bangladesh border, plus the modernization of the border security force by giving them the non-lethal weapons, the body-worn cameras, as well as the usage of the GPS trackers. And we have also established more integrated checkposts along the India-Bangladesh border. This will help in both reducing the illegal infiltration and also improving the cross-border trade, improving the economic engagement between India and Bangladesh. Plus, there has been joint coordination with the border guard Bangladesh as well. For example, the conducting of flag meetings, joint patrolling exercises, and also the coordinated seizure operations, the seizure of the contraband along the border, and the establishment of the hotline, the Director General's talk between India and Bangladesh. And there is the border area development program also, that is to give the infrastructure a push in the region, in the border districts. For example, the development of roads, schools, hospitals, availability of the drinking water, to ensure that the locals, they are not dependent upon the smuggling networks for the basic amenities, and the usage of the technology, for example the UAVs, surveillance drones, etc., and going for people-centric engagement. For example, taking up various initiatives, Maitri initiatives like Bharat Bangla Maitri initiatives. Now, what are the challenges that India faces with respect to the border management with Nepal? India-Nepal border, it is an open border. This is a long border of about 1751 kilometers. Here the movement happens without the need of a visa. You can visit Nepal without having a visa, and this is happening under the Indo-Nepal Treaty, the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. But there are territorial disputes between India and Nepal also. For example, the dispute related to the Kalapani-Limpidara-Lipulekh region, which Nepal claims as its own, but it is an integral part of the Indian territory. There is smuggling which happens along the India-Nepal border and the informal trade also. Therefore, this region has become like a hub of the transnational black markets, because here the tax is evaded, the custom duty is evaded, no tax is paid in the trans-boundary movement of the goods. Plus, there is the pushing of the fake Indian currency notes from Nepal into India, and Nepal is used as a route by the Pakistani operatives also. Nepal is used as a transit route to infiltrate India with the fake Indian currency notes. Nepal is also used as an infiltration route by the terrorists as well. Plus, there is human trafficking which happens along the India-Nepal border. As the Nepalese women, they are pushed into India for using them in forced labor, slavery, and for prostitution as well. Plus, the locals, they are also resistant from being regulated. The locals' resistance is on the grounds that they have their identity, livelihood at stake, and there are kinship-related ties between India and Nepal. Therefore, they are resistant from being regulated further. And the border infrastructure between India and Nepal, that is also sparse. For example, the number of posts that the Sashastra Seema Bal has along the India-Nepal border, there are very few. Plus, the road access is limited, and therefore there are blind spots in the surveillance along the India-Nepal borders. Now, what are the steps that India has taken with respect to the border management with Nepal? There is the deployment of the Sashastra Seema Bal, building of more integrated checkposts, and the establishment of a boundary working group, the India-Nepal boundary working group, and the development of infrastructure along the border regions through the border area development program again. Now, what are the challenges that India faces with respect to the border management with Myanmar? The India-Myanmar border, this is also porous, just like India-Nepal border, some parts of it, and the terrain is also difficult, the mountainous terrain. This is a long border of 1643 kilometers. and there are dense forests along the border, rugged hills, and also there are remote tribal areas also. There is free movement regime between India and Myanmar. This free movement regime is misused. This free movement regime is for the ethnic tribes. The ethnic tribes, for example, Nagas, Kukis, and Chins. They can travel between India and Myanmar, they can cross the border, and they can do it without having a visa also. This movement was allowed up to 16 kilometers along both sides of the border, but this was exploited by the insurgents, by the traffickers. Therefore, now India has been reviewing the free movement regime between India and Myanmar. Plus, there is cross-border insurgency also. For example, various insurgent groups of India like the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Khaplang faction particularly, they build bases in Myanmar, they operate from there, they enter into the Indian territory, they conduct attacks here and go back and hide in Myanmar. Also the ULFA, PLA, etc. Plus there is drugs and arms trafficking which happens in this region, because Myanmar, that is also very proximate to the Golden Triangle, and there is refugee influx also. The refugee influx happens from Myanmar into India, for example, the Rohingya refugees. This causes the ethnic tensions also, and this has increased especially after the 2021 Myanmar military coup. After the military coup in Myanmar in 2021, the influx of Chin people and the Kukis also increased into India. There has been the institutional presence also which has been weak. For example, there is a remote presence of the institutions, the government institutions, and the terrain has been inaccessible. Therefore, it has led to a kind of a governance vacuum being there. The governance vacuum, this is exploited by the non-state actors, various organizations and various insurgent groups which radicalize the youth there and recruit the youth. Now, what are the steps that India has taken with respect to the border management with Myanmar? We have gone for initially temporary suspension of the free movement regime. As there was an increased insurgency and the refugee influx, therefore we suspended it temporarily. Now we are reviewing the terms to balance both the protection of the ethnic ties, because there are ethnic ties between the people of India and the border regions of Myanmar, and also the national security on the other hand. We have gone for the border fencing projects. For example, now a pilot fencing was done for a 10-kilometer stretch in Manipur, and we are going for a hybrid model now, like going for the smart sensors plus also installing the physical barriers as well. Through the smart sensors, we'll be able to track the activities at the night time as well. And there is a modernization of the forces, the Assam Rifles which guards the border there, by giving them modern surveillance gear, GPS tracking and the UAVs, etc. There are joint military operations also which are conducted between India and the Myanmarese military. For example, the Operation Sunrise 1 and Sunrise 2, that is to drive out the insurgent groups from the Myanmarese soil. That is, for example, the NSC and Khaplang faction from there. And the development of the border infrastructure is done, establishment of the integrated checkposts plus the tech-enabled surveillance. For example, employing of drones, high-resolution night vision, thermal imaging in the insurgency-prone regions, including Chandel, Ukhrul and Champhai region. Please mention these in your answer. The refugee management and the border control SOPs, the standard operating procedures, have been put in place. For example, the Ministry of Home Affairs gave the guidelines in 2021-2022 to the states in the Northeast region to go for biometric registration for the refugees and going for the documentation of the refugees as well. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give for the improvement of the border management for India? We can quote the GP Bhatnagar committee. The Bhatnagar committee recommended that we should evolve a long-term vision. We should evolve a long-term doctrinal concept for the border management, rather than going for the ad hoc measures, stopgap measures for ensuring effective border management in the land borders of India. Therefore, we should not go for the fragmented deployment of multiple forces in the same operational area. We can also quote the Madhukar Gupta committee, which recommended that there must be inter-ministerial coordination to ensure effective border management, and we need to address the infrastructural gaps, going for building of more roads, better connectivity options in the border areas, and the technological integration. For example, going for biometric identification in case of the refugees, or non-invasive inspection of the border areas to ensure that the community trust is maintained. We can also go for enhanced surveillance by installing cameras, night vision devices, the intrusion detectors, etc. The cross-border collaboration can also be done to ensure there is sharing of information between India and the neighboring countries, and the border area development also. Now the Ministry of Home Affairs will introduce the concept of the Smart Borders project, which will ensure the deployment of the drones, radars, cameras, other technical resources, etc. to plug the gaps in the border security. There will also be a demography mission which will be announced soon, which will identify the infiltration routes and provide the information to the border security force. The BSF should be in the regular contact with the local revenue officials, police and the district administration to identify the illegal immigrants and look at border security as the territorial responsibility. There is a mains practice question also. Discuss the major border management challenges faced by India, examine the steps taken by the government to strengthen the border management, and suggest further measures to enhance the border security while ensuring the development in the border areas. Please try to write it. The next article is related to Quad, as India is set to host a meeting of the foreign ministers of the Quad. Therefore, we'll discuss the need of Quad for India, the challenges that India faces because of being a member of the Quad, and the future of the Quad. This is important in GS2 under the topic bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India and or affecting India's interests. First, let us look at the origins of the Quad. The Quad was formed in 2004 after the Indian Ocean tsunami. To coordinate the relief efforts after the Indian Ocean tsunami, the Quad was formed, comprising of the 4 countries: Australia, India, Japan and the United States. In 2006, Shinzo Abe proposed the Arc of Freedom and Prosperity, and in 2007 in the Malabar exercises, Japan was also included. Also in 2007, the Quad transformed into a strategic dialogue as the first Quad officials meeting took place, and it focused on the shared interests in the Indo-Pacific region. But after 2007-8, there was a collapse of the Quad grouping because China protested against it, because it was not a member of it, and therefore it naturally saw the grouping as being anti-China, and India was also hesitant, and Australia withdrew from it as it was fearful that it would end up antagonizing China, and even Shinzo Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister, also resigned. But later on he called for a revival of the partnership, the revival of the Quad, which happened post 2017. In 2017 the Quad was revived. In 2017 in the ASEAN summit at Philippines, the Quad leaders also met, and at the same time there was an aggression from the side of China. For example, there was the Doklam issue also at that time, and in 2020 Australia also rejoined the Malabar exercises, and in 2021 the first in-person Quad summit happened, which focused on the vaccines, technology and infrastructure. Therefore, now there is an expanded cooperation among the Quad members. The cooperation now includes the joint military exercises, various working groups and also an investors network, etc. And there are annual Quad leaders summits. And these annual summits, they provide the high level guidance through joint statements on the shared goals, shared principles, etc. Now, what is the need of Quad for India? The Quad functions like a strategic counter to China because it balances the expansion of China through the Belt and Road Initiative, the linkages that China has been building. Therefore, it counters the strategies of China, for example, the string of pearls strategy of China. Hence, India gets a counterbalance, a leverage by being a member of the Quad. Plus, it ensures maritime security because China has been setting up bases along the Indian maritime boundaries, also Indian Ocean, for example, setting up bases in Sri Lanka, Djibouti, etc. And it therefore deters the aggression from the Chinese side because India being a member of the Quad. It also strengthens the regional influence of India. For example, it boosts India's Act East policy because there will be better relations with Japan and Australia. Plus, it supports India's visions of Indo-Pacific and the Sagar Doctrine also, and the vaccine diplomacy as well. Plus, India gets economic benefits and defense benefits by being a member of the Quad, because it will ensure supply chain resilience, because our dependence upon China will come down. Therefore, the supply chains will become more resilient. Plus, we will have better defense partnerships, military exercises, for example, Malabar, OS Index, JIMEX, etc. with the members of the Quad. Plus, India will be seen as a global leader also. As being a member of the Quad, India is seen as a key Indo-Pacific power as well. And India is entering into democratic alliances of democratic countries against the expansionism of an authoritarian power, China. Similarly, it will have a post-pandemic influence also, as the cooperation will be varied across various sectors among the Quad members, the cooperation in technology, cooperation in climate, cooperation in the vaccine collaboration, etc. But at the same time, India faces various challenges. By being a member of the Quad, there are geopolitical risks. For example, it escalates the tensions with China. It can lead to further skirmishes along the borders with China. It complicates India's ties with China, especially because India is also a member of various groupings which China is also a part of. For example, the ties with BRICS grouping, the ties with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and India's relations with Iran and Myanmar will also be impacted because China has close ties with both Iran and Myanmar. Iran is a key source of energy for the China, sending it oil and natural gas through the Strait of Hormuz as well. Plus, there are security concerns also. For example, India is the only member of the Quad which shares a direct border with China. Therefore, our vulnerability because of the Chinese antagonism will be more. Therefore, we might have a risk of the Chinese retaliation, not only in terms of direct border skirmishes, but also in terms of the economic measures against India. There will be implementation related challenges also. For example, India's track record with respect to the delivery of the projects has been seen like a delivery deficit. For example, the delays in the implementation of the IMT, the India-Myanmar-Thailand trilateral highway, the Kaladan project, etc. Also, there will be competition from the Belt and Road Initiative because China's speed of implementation of the projects and also investment potential in the infrastructure projects along the Belt and Road have been significant in the past. Plus, there will be strategic dilemmas that India needs to tackle. For example, the balancing act will be required, balancing the ties between China and with the other Quad members, because India would naturally not want the Quad to be seen as anti-China, rather as a counterbalance to China. Plus, there can be regional distrust also, the distrust among the regional neighbors regarding the Quad grouping being the US-led containment strategy. Now, what can be the future of the Quad? The suggestions in this regard. First, there can be an expanding cooperation among the Quad members. For example, vaccine diplomacy. For the development of more vaccines or the tackling of the crisis in the future, the countries can use the complementing capabilities. For example, India's production, the finance of Japan, and the skill set of America, the logistics of Australia, etc. And there can be collaboration in the technology and the 5G to ensure that the digital sinosphere which is being created by China can be penetrated. Plus, there can be joint infrastructure and the climate related initiatives also. The strategic evolution can also happen by ensuring that the Quad is not merely a security dialogue, rather it should be seen as an action-oriented bloc. Therefore, the institutionalization potential can also be explored. China's response in this regard can also be tackled by ensuring that the Chinese do not oppose by projecting the bloc as not being as an anti-China grouping. Rather, India can take a leadership role in the Quad grouping to ensure that there is a regional impact, ensuring that India's vision of the Indo-Pacific Oceans is also fulfilled. Plus, it can have a long-term vision also. For example, defining the engagement terms with China to ensure that we are not antagonizing them also. Plus, at the same time, we are mainstreaming the Indo-Pacific concept. Now, there is a mains practice question also. What is the significance of the Quad for India in the current geopolitical landscape? Discuss the challenges that India faces as a member of the Quad. Please try to write it. The next article is related to India-Cyprus relations. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora, and also in prelims under the topic Current Events of National and International Importance. Before coming to the article, let us discuss a few facts regarding the India-Cyprus ties. Both have historical ties, both were British colonies, both were under the British rule. Then Cyprus gained independence in 1960. Then the diplomatic ties were established between India and Cyprus in 1962. Both have also been the pioneers of the non-aligned movement. Even the bust of Mahatma Gandhi has been installed near the Parliament of Cyprus. Geopolitically, Cyprus is significant for us, as India endorsed the bizonal bicommunal federation in Cyprus based upon the resolutions of the United Nations. In turn, Cyprus also endorsed the permanent membership of India in the United Nations Security Council. Cyprus also joined the International Solar Alliance. Geoeconomically also, Cyprus is significant for us because the cumulative FDI, foreign direct investment equity inflows into India from Cyprus from 2000 to 2025 were about 15 billion US dollars. And the India-Cyprus double taxation avoidance agreement has also been revised by ensuring that the source-based taxation for capital gains is as per the OECD standards, the OECD base erosion and profit shifting standards. Cyprus is classified as the FPI eligible, foreign portfolio investments eligible, for category 1 license, and it is one of the only 3 countries outside of the FATF to obtain such an approval. The bilateral trade between India and Cyprus has also been significant. For example, in fiscal year 2023-2024, it was more than $136 million. Geostrategically as well, India-Cyprus relations are significant as there is the signing of the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding on the Defense and Military Cooperation. Culturally, the ties are significant as there was a cultural cooperation agreement and also the celebration of various national days, the International Day of Yoga in Cyprus also, and there was the issuing of the commemorative stamp for the Gandhi. In Cyprus, there are people-to-people ties also, as the Indian diaspora in Cyprus is around 11,000 people, and there are professionals involved in shipping, IT, fintech, domestic help, as well as students of the Indian origin in Cyprus. And there are various festivals, the Indian festivals which are celebrated in Cyprus, including Holi, Diwali, etc. Now coming to the article, India and Cyprus have agreed to elevate the bilateral ties to the status of a strategic partnership, and there has been a 5-year roadmap for defense cooperation which was unveiled to establish a cybersecurity dialogue, strengthen the cooperation on the maritime transport, space and health. The MOU on establishing a joint working group on the counter-terrorism was signed in the field of diplomatic training on innovation and technology, establishment of official coordination and cooperation on search and rescue, on higher education and research and cultural cooperation from 2026 to 2030. Both countries share a concern, the concern of Turkey, as Turkey had backed Pakistan last year and it also has strained relationship with Cyprus also. Therefore, Cyprus is keen to procure the military equipment from India. It wants to procure drones, missiles from India which have been tested last year during the Operation Sindoor. Cyprus is not only holding the presidency of the Council of the European Union but is also emerging as a vital investment gateway between India and the entire European continent. Now, Cyprus also ranks among India's top 10 investors. Over the past decade, the investment from Cyprus into India has nearly doubled. The India-European Free Trade Agreement has opened up new possibilities as well. And capitalizing on this potential, the investment will be aimed to be doubled once again in the next 5 years. And India and Cyprus have also agreed to speed up the negotiations on the Mobility Pact. The two sides are also working towards the operationalization of the India-Middle East Europe Economic Corridor project as well. The next article is related to the Public Accounts Committee. This is important in prelims under the topic Indian Polity and Governance, Constitution and Political System. Before coming to the article, let us discuss a few facts regarding the Public Accounts Committee. It is the oldest parliamentary committee. It was established in 1921. It is one of the 3 financial parliamentary committees in India, the other ones being the Estimates Committee and the Committee on Public Undertaking. The purpose of the Public Accounts Committee is to ensure the auditing of the revenue and expenditure of the Government of India. It ensures that the public funds are spent efficiently and legally. Its functions are to examine the CAG audit reports on the government expenditure and also to ensure that the money which is sanctioned by the parliament is spent properly. Therefore, it investigates the financial irregularities, the losses and the inefficiencies in the government spending. The membership of the Public Accounts Committee includes the members from Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, 15 members from the Lok Sabha, 7 from the Rajya Sabha. The chairperson is a Lok Sabha member of parliament and traditionally he comes from the opposition. The term of the Public Accounts Committee members is 1 year and the ministers cannot be a part of the Public Accounts Committee. Let us also discuss the importance of the parliamentary committees. The parliamentary committees serve as the forums where the members of the parliament can interact with the domain experts also. As the parliament, before passing any law, goes for the deliberation of the provisions. When the parliament is deliberating, it may need the technical expertise also. That is when the parliamentary committees will serve as the forums where the MPs can engage with the domain experts. Plus, the parliamentary committees, they can help in building the consensus across the political parties. Because the proceedings in the parliament, they are televised. Therefore, the members of the parliament, they are usually speaking along the party lines only. Whereas the committees meetings, they are usually closed door meetings. Therefore, the consensus can be arrived upon in the committees meetings. Plus, the parliamentary committees examine the policy issues also. Therefore, they give the suggestions to the government and therefore the action taken report is also tabled. The parliamentary system of the government functions effectively if the bills are regularly referred to the parliamentary committees, because that is how the doctrine of the fusion of the powers ensures that the deliberation also happens and there is the fusion of the powers between the parliament and the executive. Now, coming to the article, the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee has made it clear that deciding which subjects will be taken up by the committee will be the prerogative of the Public Accounts Committee, and there is precedent also in this regard. The Public Accounts Committee panel also expressed the concerns regarding the pending action taken notes and also a heavy backlog in the audit para monitoring system. The audit para monitoring system is a web-based platform which has been set up by the CAG to track and monitor the follow-up actions by the respective ministries on the audit observations regarding irregularities, procedural violations, financial lapses or the inefficient usage of the public funds. The next article is related to the surplus transfer by the RBI to the central government. This is important in prelims under the topic economic and social development. Before coming to the article, let us discuss a few basics regarding the surplus transfer. What are the factors behind the record surplus payout by the Reserve Bank of India? The RBI has higher income from the forex holdings as the rupee depreciates, and there are interest incomes also on the securities, plus simultaneously there are increases in the prices of the gold. Now, what are the sources of earnings for the RBI in general? The RBI earns profits from the foreign currency assets like holding of bonds, treasury bills, central bank deposits, etc. Plus, it earns from the GSECs, short-term bank lending, and the management of the borrowings. As it manages and therefore gets the commission, it manages the borrowings of the central government and the state governments and the regulation of the banks and the non-banking financial institutions as well. Now, what will be the benefit for the government because of the surplus transfer, the payout? The government will now have more fiscal headroom. It will be able to use this surplus that the RBI has transferred to the central government either going for more expenditure, because to promote growth, the government also needs to go for more expenditure, or it can go for the fiscal consolidation. Therefore, it will have more fiscal headroom. Plus, it will reduce the dependence of the government on the market borrowings. When the market borrowings are lower, the borrowing cost will be lower. Therefore, the bond yields will also come down. The surplus income is the difference between the RBI's income and the expenditure, including the provisions for the reserves and the retained earnings. And this is provided for under the Section 47 of the RBI Act. The RBI Act 1934, the Section 47 of the allocation of surplus profits, that the profits or surplus transferred to the government after the contingency provisions and public policy mandates of RBI, while taking into account also the financial stability considerations. Therefore, some reserves are kept with the RBI. So, as per the economic capital framework adopted by the RBI board upon the recommendation of the Bimal Jalan committee, it is determined by using a methodology for determining the level of the risk provisions and the profit distribution. Now coming to the article, the Central Board of the RBI has approved a record surplus transfer of more than 2,86,000 crores to the central government for the accounting year 2025-2026, offering a boost to the finances of the central government. The higher dividend will improve the fiscal position of the central government and provide flexibility in the policy spending during the tough year ahead, because the government wants to promote growth. At the same time, it wants to ensure that the inflation remains under control, and the dividend payout is approximately 6.7% higher than the dividend payout in the year 2024-2025, marking the highest ever surplus transfer by the central government. Now, this amount transferred could have crossed 3.5 lakh crore also if the RBI had limited the contingency risk buffer to last year's level. But they have increased this risk buffer. The transfers to the buffers will help the central government intervene in the financial market as per the evolving macro conditions. Therefore, our contingency risk buffer has been increased by the RBI. The sharp increase in the dividend payout was supported by RBI's strong earnings during the year. At the same time, RBI raised the contingency risk buffer. A significant contributor to the higher surplus was the central bank's large-scale sale of the US dollars in the foreign exchange market to support the rupee amid persistent depreciation pressures, leading to the substantial trading gains for the RBI. In addition, the RBI also benefited from the higher returns on the foreign currency assets as the global interest rates, they have remained high. The increase in the yields in the overseas securities and investments, that also strengthened the income position of the central bank, enabling it to transfer a huge surplus while maintaining the risk buffers also. The surplus transfer by RBI is 90% of budgeted non-tax revenue under the dividend surplus of the RBI, nationalized banks and the financial institutions said for fiscal year 2027. Higher transfer will reduce therefore some pressure on the fiscal deficit for the government. The next article is related to the rising government bond yields. This is important in prelims under the topic economic and social development. First, let us understand why do governments borrow money. They borrow because the expenditure is more than the revenue. The total expenditure of the government, capital expenditure and the current expenditure, that is more than the taxation revenue plus the other revenues. And this is particularly the case for the developing countries, because in the developing countries, there are not enough people in the well-off bracket from which tax can be collected. And if there are crises, and particularly if there are repeated crises, then even the developed countries also struggle to have enough revenues as compared to the expenditure. Therefore, the developed countries, they also have a higher borrowing, not just in absolute amounts, but also as a percentage of their GDP. Now, how do the governments borrow the money? The government is usually treated as the least risky borrower in the economy, because it is assumed that the government will not default on its interest payments or the principal amount repayments, and therefore it is least likely to fail in paying back. And in the extreme crisis, the government even has the option of printing money, and therefore it can cause inflation, but at least the government will avoid defaulting. And the governments also float a bond as well. For example, there are treasury bonds in US, gilts in UK, bonds in Germany, and the government securities, the G-Secs in India. The bonds have certain terms that the government will be borrowing a particular sum for a particular period, along with the promise that they will pay a given return at the end of each year. A percentage amount will be given in the form of a return after the expiry of each year, and the principal amount will be returned at the end of the term. And therefore, the yield is a predetermined exact amount, that this is the percentage which will be given up to the final maturity of that bond. But we have a scenario of a war. The war in the Middle East region, for example. This causes inflation. Inflation is rising globally, and therefore the government's demand for money rises. Therefore, the economic prospects also decline simultaneously, and hence the governments are forced to borrow more. Then when they are forced to borrow more, then the investors, the lenders, they start demanding a higher rate of return, because the risk is also increasing because of the simultaneous inflation as well. Now, what does the rising bond yield mean? It means that it becomes costly for the government to borrow. The government will have to pay more interest, more amount in the form of the repayment, and that repayment amount will cut back upon the spending that the government could have done for economic growth, for welfare, etc. And the interest rates, they have been at the highest level since the global financial crisis of 2008. Therefore, the borrowing cost for the governments have increased. Therefore, the borrowing cost for the average consumers may also rise. Plus, therefore, more of the annual budgets will be used towards the interest repayments. Therefore, less money will be left for the spending on welfare, for the spending on defense. Otherwise, the government will have to collect more revenue by imposing more taxes, going for higher taxation rates. Therefore, the rising bond yields, it is not beneficial. The next article is related to the Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission Gramin. This is important in prelims under the topic Economic and Social Development. Before coming to the article, let us discuss a few basics regarding the MG Narega, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. The MG Narega was a demand-driven social security measure, providing for 100 days work, 100 days unskilled work based upon demand per household in a financial year, provided that the work seeker was more than 18 years old and a rural resident. Let us also look at some data related to MG Narega. This is one of the world's largest anti-poverty programs. As per the SECC Socio-Economic Census 2011, it provided employment to about 40% of the rural households, and about 7.6 crore families had active job cards. As per the NSSO survey, areas with low consumption expenditure had more requirement regarding the MG Narega and had a high demand, and the women and SC/ST beneficiaries also accorded for a high demand for the MG Narega work. This was a paradigm shift from the earlier approach, that the approach was now rights-based, demand-driven, that the work had to be provided based upon demand, and if the work was not provided, then the allowance had to be given, the unemployment allowance, and it was therefore a self-targeting scheme, providing for the bottom-up approach and also ensuring grassroots democracy. Along with this, the transparency and accountability was ensured through the MG Narega implementation via the conduct of the social audits, ombudsman, and the proactive disclosures on the portal. Now coming to the article, the center is set to adopt the objective parameters for the allocation of funds under the Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission Gramin, which will be rolled out from July 1st this year, bringing down the curtains upon the 2-decade-old MG Narega. The draft of the objective parameters has been given out, seeking public comments for 30 days. As per the draft rules, the central government shall for each financial year determine the normative allocation of funds for every state based upon objective parameters specified in these rules. The government shall adopt the objective parameters used for horizontal devolution among the states as recommended by the 16th Finance Commission and accepted by the Government of India. And from the financial year immediately after the first year of the commencement of the Act, a portion of the normative allocation may be determined by the central government, may also be determined on the basis of the following performance criteria, that is timely payment of wages, compliance with social audit requirements, and the percentage of the completion of works in a financial year, and such other performance related indicators as may be specified by the central government. In respect of the union territories for which horizontal devolution is not applicable, the central government shall determine the normative allocation on the basis of the performance criteria specified in the rules. The formula for the horizontal devolution recommended by the 16th Finance Commission is based upon 6 parameters, that is population with a weightage of 17.5%, demographic performance of 10% weightage, area 10%, forest 10%, the per capita gross state domestic product distance of 42.5%, and the contribution of GDP about 10%. Thank you.